We're recording today on the lands of the Yuggera people, and we acknowledge the traditional elders here, past, present and emerging. Hello everyone and welcome to Beyond the Rona. I'm Andrea. I'm a former registered nurse and midwife and a community advocate.
Hi, and I'm Tim. I'm a small business owner and digital marketer.
Well, today we've come to the end of season 1. So it's a bit of a celebration for us that we've made a few episodes, which is...
We have.
Yeah.
Episode 12.
Yeah. We're pretty creative there. We've done something in the world. We've left a mark. Left a
mark on Apple Podcasts, on Google Podcasts, on YouTube.
Yeah, look at us go, hey?
Yeah.
I started off not knowing how to use this microphone, and now look, you know.
But basically experts now, microphone experts.
I know. And look, at first I was like, I was having to read everything on the screen, and now I only read little bits. So look, I'm getting better. And I remember your name at the end.
That's always a bonus.
I know, Tim. I know. I know. And, most of the time we dress alike. So, there's things that are happening here. We're actually becoming something, which
we are.
I think we should definitely keep this going. There's a few people that we've spoken to recently, over the past couple of months that it's been really interesting conversations, hasn't it, of how to build back better now that we're moving through this virus period.
Yeah, exactly. We've covered quite a few topics in the last 5, because the last time I guess we did one of these recap episodes was after the first 5, and so now we're kind of looking at now the last 5 episodes. But yeah, they've been really great, and there's been some continuing themes that have gone across a few of them. And we're trying to think more about how we structure these episodes, and especially as well for season 2, how they're structured, so that we can kind of continue some of the really big themes in groups, and get different perspectives from people.
Yeah. So since we last caught up, we've had Asher and Rosie on. So I think for everybody's sake, Asher she is a psychology student. I think I remember. Yeah, psychology student and a community advocate. And she's actually a candidate in this upcoming federal election too. And hearing her perspective on mental health, and how COVID has affected young people, especially, because she's actually a young person herself. That was really interesting. And then Rosie, a young non-binary person, to hear, their perspective, that was really interesting. And how young people have been affected in, through this pandemic period, and how it's they sort of suggested housing was an issue, TAFE and uni was an issue, those sorts of things that they were really, it was an interesting discussion, wasn't it?
It was the voice of our youth, and I think young people just generally don't get a platform enough, I just think, in just everyday media. So it's really important to hear their experiences, especially Ash is studying right now in university, and Rosie is a very recent grad, and so I think a year 12 grad, and so I think all of these cohorts of year 12s from 2020 and 2021 are a generation that is experiencing that part of their life really differently to everyone else.
Yeah.
And there's ramifications there, I think, for their pathways.
Yeah.
And there are, unfortunately, some industries that career pathways that will actually benefit from the changes that have happened in the workforce, and then there are others that will be disadvantaged.
Yeah.
And I think that just complicates things for, an age group that already finds it hard as it is.
Yeah, and I think...
but hearing it firsthand.
Yeah, and I think young people really... I think young people really feel that weight, that pressure, of not only rebuilding back, but of the last sort of 20 years of poor government policy, really, of setting themselves up for the future. They really feel that they've been left behind, and they're trying to figure out, what kind of future do they have post-pandemic, but what kind of future did they have anyway? They're very uncertain, aren't they? So they've got that anxiety that was there in the first place, but then the anxiety of COVID has kind of compounded on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And, the point you mentioned about housing, which they both touched on, I think what's really interesting with housing is all governments, by any colour and stripe, all identify the issue in the housing market and how very, very hard it is for first home owners and young people to get into that market just because of what's happened over the decades. And so they acknowledge it and just go, yes, it's very hard, very hard, very hard. And nothing seems to be done, around actually addressing it. And the things that they do to address it actually a lot of the times have a negative impact on the situation and make housing actually even more unaffordable. And the one thing that Asher touched on really briefly, that we'll drop a link to this in the show notes, is actually if you have a look at the Greens website and click on housing, the plan that's there around increasing the stock of housing commission, stock for those people that actually need housing, and then the plan to address unaffordability for young people, for first homeowners, and actually capping the price of government housing that essentially you can kind of like rent to earn. And then there's another set aside for actually creating affordable rentals. And it's actually, when you look at it, and even if you were to, remove the kind of like political party from it, if you just look at it as a plan, it's a really good plan. We'll drop the link in the notes, because I think it's the first time that, in my experience, where I've seen a housing plan that you look at and go, this is really good. This would actually address housing affordability for young people. So,
that is good. It's an interesting, maybe it's another episode that we could really look into. Yeah.
Yes. I think absolutely. You should.
Okay. Yeah, that is good. And actually, education is another big one. We touched on that already about, the fact that it, not only is difficult for them to afford housing, but it's also difficult for them to start their lives having these huge university HECS debts, when for previous generations they didn't have the huge housing or mortgage debts, the huge living costs that previous generations did, And so one of the ways that we could reduce that burden on them is perhaps providing free TAFE or free university, perhaps for their first degree. These are ideas that are going around to try to make things a little bit easier for young people. Yeah. So we actually had Nick Robertson, was that his name? Yeah?
Nick Robertson, yeah.
He was on as well, wasn't he? And telling us kind of a little bit of a perspective about teaching and coming through the pandemic from his perspective. It was interesting, wasn't it, to hear what it was like doing schooling from home on the, during the pandemic and using devices, and what it was like for kids who didn't have access to the internet. And, that was interesting hearing his perspective. Hey,
it was. And I really liked how, we heard from those that were actually going through that and experiencing, from Rosie, who had kind of actually lived through that as a student. And then on the flip side, as a teacher for Nick now, what that was like for him as a teacher and having to restructure everything. And yeah, I guess, the pandemic actually accelerated technology take up in a lot of schools, but then as well, how do we actually address the fact that technology is actually expensive? And we say, technology is the answer, but it's like, for families doing it tough, buying a laptop, buying an iPad is expensive. Yeah. And they're just like, all right, well, this is how learning works now. It's on a laptop. And so that there's already barriers. There were already barriers, and now we've got more barriers.
Yeah. And I suppose one of the biggest barriers that we have to our democracy at this point is the level of corruption and corporate greed, and these corporate donations that are happening to like disempower the people, which we kind of touched on when we talked to Ben Pennings. That was a really good discussion, wasn't it? Like, to hear about what's happened with him, and just really have a think about the fact that we were all under the impression, I think, maybe when we were kids, we were all under the impression that the government is there for us, kind of like Santa Claus. I use that analogy a bit, that, the government is there for us, and, they'll do everything that we ask for because, well, I don't know, they're supposed to. Like, they will all do the right thing, won't they? But actually, it's not like that in reality. We have large corporate powerful people who will donate to these political parties and get them to do what they want, which isn't particularly what you voted for. And it's interesting to be slapped with reality like that, isn't it?
It is. And it's actually really, it's a mix of emotions. I feel like really sad that our system has become like this and is really powered by money. That's like, government is literally beholden to the millions of dollars that, gets donated by corporations, especially in these industries like the fossil fuel industry and whatnot. But it's sad. It's also, it makes me really, angry and upset that the system has been turned this way and kind of captured by the corporations. So I think, when you look around the world, you can certainly see that there's other countries that struggle with corruption. It's like everywhere. But the thing is that what Ben was talking about was that you can take back that power. We can make movements in the positive direction that can start to pull money out of the decision making, because decision making really needs to be for us.
Yeah, and so tell us, Tim, how do we take back our power?
What did Ben say again? Cue episode 9. Whatever he said.
Don't you have all the answers, oh Tim?
Yeah, no, listen to episode 9.
I'm sure we band together, don't we? We have a collective voice. You told me that once. I believed in you.
That's it. There's a new breed, I think, of candidate now that isn't affected by that system, because they just actually don't take donations. Like, the actual solution is actually very simple: don't take political donations. But in reality, it's quite hard for the political class to make that change. But there are new candidates coming through, and I think finding those in wherever you're listening from, like in your local community, that's step one.
I really think COVID has made a lot of people wake up. You hear that all the time, wake up, sheeple. You do, you see that written a lot. But I do think COVID has made a lot of people wake up, and realise that, especially with this, like, vaccination debate, et cetera, that people have sort of suddenly realised that they actually need to take notice of what's going on around them, and maybe suddenly realise that politics does affect a lot of areas of their lives that maybe they didn't realise before. That
yes,
that maybe medical decisions do need to have their consent. Maybe they do need to start thinking about whether or not they want to consent to certain things or not consent to certain things. Maybe they do need to start thinking about these things, and actually not be so passive in their lives and actually, take a little bit more, I want to say control, but I don't think it's control that I'm thinking of. I think it's more like decision-making ability. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I think that, we really, if you're not satisfied with the system, then kind of like do something about it. And I think broadly, it's a very kind of like Australian response to think about politics and go, oh, bloody politics. Like,
and then
we're all kind of like sick of, yes. And what I've been learning recently is that switch off behaviour is by design. That the system wants you to switch off from it, so that it can do its thing. And I think, the more that we don't switch off and realise that actually, when we consolidate our efforts and organise our efforts together, we can actually change things. So that's a theme that comes through quite a lot, and certainly we heard that a lot in what Ben was talking about, and also his personal fight against big corporations like
Adani. So having said that, and trying to think of plans to move forward, then we had a chat to Claire Garton, who's she does represent the trans community as well, and proudly so, which I think is great to have these representatives of minority groups come on the show. I'm proud to actually to have these representatives on, that we're not only showing on our show different community members who are community advocates out there, but also getting minority groups to actually have a voice. I'm loving that about our platform. But Claire had some some great information for infrastructure and and the pros and cons of inland rail, which is a massive one for, I think, this federal election. People are going to be having that one front of mind.
Yes.
Yeah, and other things like, talking about the Olympics and what that means for our local people, because, of course, that's for, was it 2023? I don't really follow the Olympics, but...
32.
Oh, okay, whatever. I'll probably miss it.
So, yeah. You're not going to tune in. You might just flick past and go, nah.
No, I don't watch any of it. But good luck to them.
Opening and closing.
No, I don't even watch that. No, sorry. No, good luck to them. Oh. Yeah. No.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, no. Good. I do. Good luck to the sporting people. But yes.
Yes.
But no, you'll have to carry the sporty conversations. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's your job.
All right.
Go sporty.
Yep. Sports. Yes, sports. Okay.
Yeah, and then we had Max Hooper. That was a great one. Yeah, and I really liked his idea of having, all three levels of government come together to really work together and solve some of these problems as we go through COVID, because this is true, and to really have like a long-term vision, because I think for the past 20 years that I've known of, I mean, this has probably gone on forever, but they seem to just make plans that are just until the next election, and then they dump money into the electorates that are, the marginal seats, where they need to get votes there to actually win that seat. which some people might call rorting the system, and other people call, that's an intelligent way to win that seat. And, the people who live there are celebrating because they get what they need to live a good life. But everybody else around says, well, that's not fair. The money should be distributed evenly because we all need things. So it's a really interesting thing to think about of how does money get distributed evenly so that everybody has what they need to live a good life, It's and I do think I agree with him. I think all three levels of government should be working together: the council, the state, and the federal. And as well as that, I think it is definitely one of the problems that we have, that people who don't understand politics do get mixed up between what and who they're voting for at each election.
Exactly.
I think we've had way too long in our schooling system where we haven't actually taught people about politics. And so when they come to an election, I think people tend, and this isn't just me, people tend to vote for who their family has voted for, and, who they've always voted for. And, I don't think they're really thinking about the issues that are happening in their community and whether that's a council issue, a state issue, or a federal issue, So your council issues might be your local footpaths. Your state issue might be your hospitals and schools, and your federal issue might be, inland rail as it comes up and crosses the border. But once it crosses the border into Queensland, then it becomes a state issue, So when we're coming up to this federal election, people might be talking about Anastasia Palaszczuk, or they might be talking about, our state MPs, but they're not quite getting it that we're voting in a federal election, and there's no education out there for people who don't understand politics. And I think that they're kind of doing that on purpose.
Yes.
It's not
by design.
Yeah, I think it is. Way back, we talked to, what was his name? The young fella. Oh God, shit. What was his name? Drew.
The young fella.
Drew. We talked to Drew. Yes, way back.
Yes.
And he was saying that politics is kind of kept out of the hands of the grassroots people. That it's kind of made elite. So that people really don't understand what they're doing, and it's made that way on purpose. So that, they really don't know who to vote for. They just kind of vote for the same people each time. And I think there needs to be a little bit more transparency around what's going on, who donates to who, who's meeting who for how much money, because these cash for access meetings are happening. How much money exactly does the fossil fuel corporations donate to which parties?
Exactly.
How much influence does Gina Reinhardt really have on everything that goes on around here? Why was she at the Olympics committee meeting? What does Gina Reinhardt have to do with it? And, I really think we should have a lot more transparency about what goes on with politics, and they really need to bring it down to a level that the regular everyday person can understand. And I think that's what's made a lot of the anger with not understanding how vaccines work as well. Because we've had a lot of misinformation out there about vaccines, and why should we have 2 vaccines and then a booster, and, the vaccines don't work because you've got to have a booster. There's all of this misinformation out there. That all stems from mistrust as well, from not being transparent, not having really good messaging out there. There's a lot they could improve on. They're not treating the public as sort of their partners in creating a great Australia.
Yeah. Well, I think as well, that point that Max touched on of having our MPs actually be like really honest, and so it's not the typical kind of buck passing and blaming and all this kind of stuff that we normally see, but actually having our MPs tell us this is the situation, and when we get glimpses of that, and so he kind of referenced he referenced Duncan. When you have glimpses of that in your MPs, then that can help build trust. And I think that over the years, there's been moments of that when you think of certain politicians that have like leveled with the people.
Yes.
And I think that, so, we've seen the ability for our political class to do that. It's just, unfortunately, it's very rare. And
ones who show emotion and empathy, and ones who cry, not that you want all your politicians to cry. I mean, there are certain ones that I want to cry. But
yes.
But you want them to actually have some feelings, like
that's it. Yeah. And actually, what both Max and Claire as well touched on was this idea of community, and so thinking of like local government, but community organisations or community movements. And Claire is such a champion in that, in her community around mobilising and just bring people together to talk about and try to problem solve, kind of like what we're doing on a podcast, but doing it in real life. And Max was as well talking about how like government is us, it is the people, and I had never kind of just thought about it in that exact way, is that government is us. We are like the people are represented. That is what it's meant to be.
Right.
Of course it's not these days, but and that idea of kind of like taking the driver's seat or getting behind the wheel. Like, I like that metaphor.
Yes. It's like not looking to is the word a deity? Deity? Is that the word? Like not looking to worship these people as if they're above us. These people are our elected representatives. Like we have asked them to go to this Parliament building and take our concerns to these other people who've been elected from each of our electorates. Go to this Parliament building and tell them what we want, not to be this like almighty, all-powerful person that we're never allowed to speak to unless we pay $5,500. Like,
yes,
that's.
I like how you included the GST in that.
That is just absurd. Absurd.
Yeah, it is. It is. The fact that it has just corroded over time, the system's corroded and allowed money and other things to influence decision making is a real shame. But I think we know now about it, and it's out there in the open. There's nothing to hide anymore. You can't hide this kind of thing. And the really good thing is that there is transparency. You can look up, and this is another link that we can drop in the show notes. You can literally look up every political donation that's being made by corporations. Like it's completely open, and you can see the money transferring.
Right.
And like what Ben said, you could see the money transferring from Adani to One Nation, and then suddenly One Nation changes their policy.
Yeah.
Like you can literally follow the money through.
Right.
And I think that's the power that we have as people, as we can see all this happening.
Right. So, moving on from here, now this is about to be published. This episode is going to be published. You said like the end of February. So we're like in a little time machine at the moment. And
we are.
So let's pretend we're at the end of February. Okay. So it's possible that an election is going to be called a federal election. So we're probably going to be moving into like getting really active and passionate right now, about.
Yes.
I'm gonna start getting really
even more than
before. Yeah.
Oh, even more than
Yes.
before. Oh, right. Okay.
I'm going to get full-on passionate. Season 2, watch out. Watch.
Yes. It's the season of
It
passion.
is the passion season. Yes. Yes. I tell you what, I'm going to bring on, well, you're going to bring him on because you're friends with him more so than me. But you're going to bring on this guy who's going to talk to us about how we can improve Medicare. And one of the things that I think will be really good for the people of Logan is bringing dental into Medicare. This is something I really believe could help our people in terms of health. And what else could we do? We can talk about digital health moving into the future.
Huge area.
And really have a look at more minority groups, I think, and break that down even further and get those voices heard moving into season 2 as we raise our voices in time for the election.
It's going to be a prime time, and I think this is going to be a great season. 2 is going to be great. I think we'll touch on the really big issues, digital, tech, health, and then those. I think like what we've done in season 1, amplifying those voices in the community that wouldn't that we don't hear from enough. I think that's the thing, is that we just don't hear from them enough, and we need better representation.
Yes, and there are other political podcasts around. If people wanted to, if they're addicted now to politics and they want to move on from our basic podcast, and they want to move on.
So they graduated
now from our podcast, and they want to go to more political stuff. So, definitely, there's a few that you would recommend. What were they, Tim?
Yeah, there's the podcast from Tom Ballard and Emerald Moon called Serious Danger, which is great. I would recommend that.
Because they have a few calls to action, don't they, where you can email your MP and all this sort of stuff. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that's a great one to check out. What about you? I don't know. I think ours is the best.
Might be a biased opinion, but
stick with us.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Well, that's our time. So great talking to you today, Tim. You better get back to work.
Pleasure.
Capitalism means get back to work.
Swap hours for dollars.
Yes, that's right.
Let's do it.
Okay. Good to talk to you. We'll see you getting ready for the election for season 2.
See you at season 2.
You've been listening to Beyond the Rona. Captioned audio is available on our YouTube channel, or you can visit beyondtherona.com to catch previous episodes or to keep in touch. We'll catch you later.